Hey everyone, today we're diving in on how to draw a realistic iris in Procreate using just the default brushes, no fancy extras needed. If you find this tutorial helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and keep up with more Procreate tips. Also, if you're looking for a community of fellow artists learning the ins and outs of realism, definitely join my exclusive Facebook group. The link is in the description. You'll find more tips and support and creative inspiration there. And don't forget to grab the color palette for this tutorial. It's also available in the description. But let's get started. So we're going to be starting off with using our inking, or using a brush from the inking category in Procreate, and it's called Syrup. And I like this brush for drawing things like this just because it's got a nice border to it. It's nice and thick and doesn't leave any blurred lines. So we'll start off with that brush. We're going to be taking a dark green color, and we're just gonna be drawing a circle on our first layer. So what you can do is just hold your pen at the end of your circle, use 2 fingers to hold down, and it will make a perfect circle for you. Then we're going to color drop it so it fills in perfectly for us. Next, we're going to alpha lock this layer because we're going to start coloring it in, and we can just go into the airbrushing category and I chose just a medium blend for this. So we're going to be adding in some blues and some greens and just a little bit of lighter colors as well. So we're going to start with adding some blue on the right side, and you can see how nice and soft this brush is, and it's great for blending out as well. Great, so we want it to look something like this. It really doesn't need to be perfect. We're just adding random colors around, but just to get the base down. So now we're gonna use that same airbrush tool in our smudge tool, and we're just going to blur it all together here just so that we don't have any hard lines and it's all seamless. Great, so next thing we're going to do is add a new layer. We're going to go back to our syrup brush, and we are going to choose a black, and we're just going to create the pupil in the middle. So we want this to be smaller. We're going to do the same thing we did previously for the iris, and now we can actually move this layer around. So it doesn't matter if you draw it right in the center, we can move it right to the center afterwards. Perfect, then we're gonna color drop that as well. And we're going to actually be focusing mainly on the iris part. So we'll go back into that layer. And next what we're going to do in the inking brush, we're going to take the ink roll brush. And for this, we're going to start adding in some darker lines just to create kind of that base texture of the eye. So I do go out of this color palette just a little bit just to add in a little bit of darker colors, but you'll see in just a moment here, I'm just going to take this dark green color. We're going to be taking it over to brown. So I just adjusted the color wheel a little bit there. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to make it a clipping mask layer over top of our iris so that we can color within the iris while still keeping these lines on a new layer. So this ink roll brush is it takes a little bit to learn how to use, because if you tilt your Apple Pen over, it will actually create a bit of a different almost line for you. As you can see, when I go to the side, it makes it a lot thinner. So I actually have to tilt my brush over a little bit and adjust how I'm holding it in order to create different types of size of lines. But we do want to keep it the same size. I do adjust it a little bit over on the right hand side, as you'll see, but nothing crazy. We just want to create like lines like this, but they can be very random and different sizes as well, because we're going to be adding different effects to them afterwards. So once we add in some of these, we can keep it all the same color, this kind of pale lightish brown color, and then we're going to be going in with a darker brown as well. Fantastic, this is looking good. So now we're going to go to our adjustments over to the Liquify tool, and we're going to choose the edge brush. So we're going to make the size just under half, about a quarter, and we're going to start pulling at those lines. And you'll notice the way my hand is moving, I'm going back and forth, and we're kind of squeezing the lines to create a bit of an interesting texture. It kind of squeezes the lines to make them a bit thinner and thicker in different areas, and I really found this effect to look really realistic once I was creating these different textures in the iris. So next we're going to go into our smudge brush, because we want to smudge these lines out just a little bit, and I choose the oil brush at first, and so we're just going to go ahead and do some stroking motions like this, just so that the lines aren't looking too hard. We want to make them a little bit more blurry, so I'm just pulling in from the outside of the iris and the inside near the pupil as well, doing a back and forth motion. So we want to make sure that we're using the brush in the same direction that the lines are going already to create the effect that we want. All right, after we're done this, we're going to create a new layer. We're going to clip it again so that it obeys the bottom layer where our circle is. And so next we're going to be starting adding in some additional lines. So we can stay with that ink roll brush, and we're just going to be adding even more depth by adding more lines at a different color with some highlights almost. And so we're going to be doing the same thing we're just going to be brushing our brush over top of the lines we just made. And we're going to be repeating the process. And so we can kind of even add in like a little bit of movement in the iris as well with some of these lines. They don't have to be perfectly straight, but you just want them to be flowing in the correct direction in a radial sense, so that each direction is appealing to the perspective outline or the outer edge of the iris. Okay, going back to the Liquify tool, we're doing the exact same thing with the edge function within the Liquify tool. And now you'll notice I start kind of pushing them a little bit in different directions, because I find that the squiggliness that this brush, or sorry, that this action takes with the Liquify tool is really cool. So we can start using also the push feature. So what I did is I go over and I push the different lines over a little bit, just to create them to have a bit more squiggles, because we don't want them to be perfectly straight. So you'll notice that I'm just pushing them in and out. Great, next what we're going to do is take that same smudge brush that we're using, the oil brush, we're just going to do the exact same thing. We don't want to make sure we're not over blending these just because we want to still be able to see some of those nice lines, but we just don't want them to be as sharp looking. Alrighty, next we're going to create a new layer. Again, we're going to use it as a clipping mask. And we're going to go back in with our syrup brush as well. So we'll go back to that one there, and we're just going to be adding in some more texture or details to the eye. So we're going to be going over and making these kind of squiggly motions. So you can make these look pretty random. It really does not matter too much. Again, we just want it to be going in a radial direction around the eye to make it look right. So we just want to just go in, make some lower, make some higher, and just make it honestly completely random, just like this. So next, what we're going to do is take the smudge brush, but I start off with this oil brush. I didn't really love how the effect was looking. I just go back here and I actually just go over to the wet acrylic brush. So that's the one we want to be using. I found this to be blending really, really well for this eye. So we're going to be going in with that brush over this layer. So go ahead and just use this brush, but also make sure that you're doing a back and forth motion, almost like you're scribbling over top of those lines. All right, we're going to create another layer doing the same thing, making it a clipping mask. And now we are going to take the syrup brush, we're going to increase it a little bit just to make the lines a bit differentiated from the last couple. And we're going to be taking this really light yellowy green color, and we're just going to create some thicker lines over in some areas just to create some more depth as well. We want to almost create like a bit of a light effect doing this. So I'm taking a bit of a lighter white color just to go over near where the blue is on the right-hand side, just to give it a little bit more variation. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. So you know the drill, we're gonna go back over to our smudge brush and we're just going to do the exact same thing. And we are gonna use that wet acrylic brush and just go back and forth. We can make this a little bit bigger, have a little bit more opacity to it as well. And we're just going to do a back and forth motion, pulling and pushing that light layer that we just made. Alrighty, we're gonna create another layer. We're gonna click on that first layer that's underneath the most recent one we made. And we're going to be adding in some lines, just some squiggly lines just to meet in the middle of the pupil, which I found to look really good because we're going to actually go ahead and add a liquify effect to these as well. So before we go to the Liquify tool, we're gonna go in and blend some of these out first, just a little bit, just so that we can have them before we go in with the Liquify effect. So just take that same smudge brush and do the exact same thing we've been doing this whole time, just going back and forth motion just to soften these lines just a little bit. Great, so we're going back to the Liquify tool. We're going to choose the edge tool, and you'll notice that I actually go in multiple different directions here to create some squiggles, and I really liked this effect and thought it looked really realistic. So yeah, just use your pen and kind of go back and forth and up and down and do all of that, so it kind of creates these squiggly lines. Great, we're going to create a new layer, lots of layers in this tutorial, but hopefully this helps you guys understand how layer management should work as well. So we're gonna be taking a light blue, and this time what we're going to do is go back to our ink roll brush, and we're just gonna create a little bit more pattern over on the blue side of the eye. So we're going to just be adding just a little bit of highlights, and we're just going to do a nice back and forth motion just like this. And then we're going to go back to the Liquify tool, and we're going to use the edge brush, and we're going to go in and do the exact same thing. So we're going to go ahead and start making these a little bit more squiggly. Now we're going to go in with the smudge brush, and we're just going to blend these out a little bit. Next, we want to add a little bit more depth to the left side of the eyes. We're going to create another layer, and we're going to be taking the ink roll brush, and we are going to take a light green color, and we're going to just create some more texture over on this side of the eye. So I didn't like how I brushed that, so I just go back. So apologies there, but we're just going to make sure that the brush is the angle that we need it to be, because again, the ink roll brush is a little bit funny like that. But we're just going to kind of make this round motion and pull in some more highlight to the eye. And we're going to be brushing it in just like that. And just notice my technique here. I just go in and do little movements that go inward towards the eye from the outside, but we don't want to touch the outer edge of the eye. We still want the darkness behind. So I go in with a little bit of a lighter color too, just to add a little bit more depth to this layer too. So it's not just one flat light green. So we go in, add a little bit of a lighter one, and make movements back and forth just like so. Just adjusting the ink roll brush too, making sure it's positioned well so it gives me some good strokes. Go to the smudge brush, not the eraser brush, and then we're going to be doing the exact same thing, just blending this out. Once that's done, we're going to go back to our adjustments, use the Liquify tool, and we're going to use the the edge brush as well, we're just going to pinch some of this in. Fantastic. So now we're going to take a light white color. We're going to create a new layer on the very top, going to make sure it's a clipping mask layer as well. And we are going to add in some more highlights. So again, this is just using our syrup brush, and we're just going in and adding some more lines because I wanted some more highlights over on this side. So same thing, we're now going to just blend this out. Going back to the Liquify tool, we're just going to be pinching this layer as well. Alrighty, so next we're going to create a new layer, and we don't want to add any adjustments to this layer just yet. So we're going to take the syrup brush again. We're going to take this light green color, and we're going to draw a circle around our existing circle. So we want it to touch the circle. We don't want it to go above it. And you'll see why in just a moment, but it's going to kind of create a bit of a blurred effect around the eye to make it look a little bit more realistic. So if the circle wasn't perfectly aligned with the outside of the eye, you can use the distort effect on the sizing portion. So you can kind of pull and push it in the direction that you want. So see, it just went over a little bit. We want it to be hugging the eye, not on the outside. We want it to be on the inner part of the eye still. So what we can do here is if we alpha lock this circle that we just made, or this lined circle, and take a airbrush, we're going to go around the outer part of this eye and start to add in some different colors. So we want to add in a little bit of darkness. We're going to leave a little bit of lightness as well, but this definitely gives the eye a little bit more texture. We're also going to be using the blue on the blue side, just like so. Perfect. So next what we're going to do is go to the adjustments for this layer, and we're going to Gaussian blur it. We don't want to put it too far, but we just want to blur out the edge just a little bit. Make sure alpha lock is turned off so it works properly, but you'll notice here we can just blend out that layer, and now it looks a little bit more blurry. Gives the eye a bit more of a realistic effect rather than having those hard edges around the original circle. So now what we want to do is we're going to be working with the pupil. So eyes are a muscle, so the pupil is never this perfect circle, and you do want to edit part of the eye as well. So what we're going to do is go into our smudge brush, and then we are going to actually go to the ink roll brush. I found this brush to be perfect for this, and we're going to make sure that the flat part is going to be horizontal to the direction that we're pulling. So you'll notice the brush cursor and the angle that it's on. So just make sure that you're doing it in this angle. I find it to have the best effect rather than having it vertical. So now I make the ink roll brush just quite a bit smaller, and we're just going to create some more fine lines through it. So we want those little skinny lines to be there too, just to add in a little bit more detail. So lastly, what we're going to do is create a new layer, and it's going to be the light reflection layer. So it's going to be white. So we'll start off with white. We're going to alpha lock it after and add a little bit of color to it, but we're going to start off with white. We're going to choose an airbrush, and we're just going to create some pockets of reflection. So we want it to be nice and soft. We don't need it to be too hard because we are going to be going in with the smudge tool just to create a little bit more texture within the light reflection as well. But we'll start off here. And now if we go into the smudge brush, what I'm going to do is still use that ink roll brush and pull up and down around the edges of this light reflection. Great, so we're gonna alpha lock that layer, and the reason behind this is we're gonna add some color to the light reflection. So we're gonna take that same airbrush and we're just gonna add in some blue and a bit of a darker color as well, just to add in a little bit more depth to the light reflection. So we'll take even a deeper blue, and we're just going to add it around the edges. You don't wanna color in the whole thing to be like this. It's really just to give it a bit more of a realistic effect. So next we're going to take alpha layer off just so that we can properly blend this out a little bit more if we need to, and still using that ink roll brush to do that. So next what I want to do is take the syrup brush with the eraser and actually create some lines, almost like imitating eyelashes if they were seen through the light reflection against the eye. So they don't need to be perfect, but just try to replicate them a little bit more to be like eyelashes, nice little swoops, and they can kind of connect in certain areas as well. So next I just go back to the original layer, the color layer, just because I wanted to add a little bit of a darker blue to the side of the right eye as well. So because that layer is sitting at the very bottom, we can easily go in and add in some more of that depth or highlight as well, without affecting anything else on the drawing, which is what layer management is so great for. So we're going to just be adding in a little bit more here. And then the last thing that we're going to do actually is on that circle layer we created around the outside of the iris. I just wanted to go in with a bit of an airbrush and start to blend a little bit, because I noticed that it was a bit of a harder line around the edge, which I didn't necessarily love. So make sure you're not over blending this part, because it is such a fine line that it could just take it away completely. So just make sure you're doing that very delicately and just going around some of the edges if you feel like it's a bit of a hard line for you as well. Alrighty, I'm almost done detailing this, so thank you so much for following along. I hope you enjoyed learning on how to draw a realistic iris in Procreate. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Procreate tips and realistic drawing tutorials. Be sure to check out my other videos for more realism focused content. Happy drawing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.